The hidden letter that my mother-in-law secretly left me revealed a truth so shocking that it changed everything, especially for her children who had smugly taken her entire estate after I'd devoted a decade of my life to her care. My name is Margaret Wilson, and at 65, I never imagined that the woman I'd bathed, dressed, and comforted through years of declining health would leave behind words powerful enough to turn her family's greed into their greatest regret. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from, and if you've ever experienced betrayal from someone you considered family. Make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's video will show you exactly how to protect yourself when those you trust show their true colors. This photograph was taken at my wedding to Richard 15 years ago. That's his mother, Evelyn, standing beside us, her arm linked through mine as we both smiled. Despite the 20-year age difference between us, Evelyn and I had formed an immediate bond. My grandmother who raised me always said, "Margaret, remember that a person's true character isn't revealed when things are easy, but when difficult choices must be made." This wisdom became my anchor when the family I had cared for chose possessions over appreciation. After Richard passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack 5 years into our marriage, his mother Evelyn, then 75, fell into a deep depression. Her health deteriorated rapidly, first arthritis that limited her mobility, then the early signs of dementia. Richard's children from his first marriage, Adam and Cynthia, lived on opposite coasts with demanding careers and families of their own. "Someone needs to look after Mom," Adam said after Richard's funeral. "Obviously, we can't uproot our entire lives to move back home." The unspoken expectation was clear. As Richard's second wife, the one without children of my own, the one whose nursing career I had paused to care for Richard during his final illness, I was the logical choice. "I'll stay with Evelyn," I said, making the decision that would shape the next decade of my life. What began as a temporary arrangement transformed into a full-time caregiving role. I moved into Evelyn's Victorian home, the family homestead where Richard had grown up. At first, Adam and Cynthia called weekly and visited on holidays. But as years passed, their communication became increasingly sporadic, their visits shorter and less frequent. "They're busy with their own lives," Evelyn would say, making excuses even as I saw the hurt in her eyes when another birthday passed with only a hurried phone call. I became Evelyn's world, her caretaker, her companion, her confidant. I administered her medications, drove her to countless doctor appointments, modified the house for her decreasing mobility, and eventually learned to navigate the heartbreaking complexities of dementia care. When she no longer recognized her own children during their rare visits, I smoothed over the awkward moments. When she woke confused at night, I sat beside her bed, holding her hand until she slept. When she could no longer manage personal care, I preserved her dignity while tending to her most intimate needs. On her 85th birthday, during what would be her last period of lucidity before dementia took her mind completely, Evelyn held my hand tightly. "I've updated my will," she told me, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "You should know that you'll be taken care of, Margaret. This house, it should stay with someone who loves it. You've made it a home again." I dismissed her words as the confusion that often accompanied her condition. We had never discussed inheritance, and I had never expected anything in return for caring for her. When Evelyn passed away peacefully after 10 years under my care, the grief hit me with unexpected force. Beyond losing a mother-in-law, I had lost a daily purpose and the last connection to the family I had married into. Adam and Cynthia arrived for the funeral with their families, stepping into the house they had visited so rarely with the confident ownership of blood relations. They accepted condolences from community members, nodding solemnly as people praised my decade of devoted care. "We don't know how Mom would have managed without Margaret," they told well-wishers, their gratitude seeming genuine. 3 days after the funeral, I sat across from Evelyn's attorney, Adam and Cynthia flanking me on either side. The weight of exhaustion from 10 years of caregiving hung heavy as I prepared to hear the final wishes of the woman I had come to love as family. The family home at 1423 Maple Avenue and all its contents are bequeathed to Adam and Cynthia Reynolds, to be divided equally between them, the attorney stated, adjusting his glasses. I felt the shock like a physical blow. The home I had lived in and maintained for a decade, where I had installed wheelchair ramps and handrails, where I had spent countless hours tending the garden that brought her joy even when she could only observe it from the window, was not to be my home after all. The remainder of Evelyn's financial assets are likewise to be divided equally between her children, Adam and Cynthia Reynolds. Adam patted my hand in what seemed intended as comfort. Don't worry, Margaret. We'll make sure you have plenty of time to find a new place. Cynthia nodded. Mom obviously just forgot to update things after Dad died. You know how confused she was these past few years. But Evelyn hadn't been confused when she told me she'd updated her will. According to the attorney, the will had been updated just 2 years ago, during a period when she still had regular intervals of lucidity. Is there nothing else? I asked, my voice distant to my own ears. The attorney shuffled through his papers. Mrs. Reynolds did leave a personal letter to be delivered to you, Margaret. I have it here. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Evelyn's shaky handwriting. We'll need to discuss transition plans for the house, Adam said, already shifting to practical matters. Cynthia and I are thinking about putting it on the market. Of course, I responded automatically, the envelope heavy in my hands. I'll need some time to pack my things. Take all the time you need, Cynthia assured me. A month or 2 is fine. Their generosity in allowing me time to leave the home I had maintained for a decade felt like salt in an open wound. As I drove back to the house, no longer my home, apparently never truly my home, the unopened letter sat on the passenger seat beside me, Evelyn's final communication too painful to face in that moment. Back at the house, I moved through rooms, filled with a decade of memories. None of it had been mine, not legally, not in the eyes of her children who had visited a handful of days each year while I provided 24-hour care, not in the final testament of the woman who had told me I would be taken care of. With hands that suddenly felt much older than my 65 years, I finally picked up the envelope and broke the seal. My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter, recognizing Evelyn's distinctive handwriting, more unsteady than it once had been, but still unmistakably hers. The paper seemed to hold the weight of her final thoughts, her last communication to the woman who had cared for her when her own children had been too busy with their lives. My dearest Margaret, the letter began. I could almost hear her voice, clear and strong as it had been before illness claimed her mind. If you're reading this, I have passed on, and you have discovered that my legal will does not match what I told you during our conversation on my 85th birthday. This must feel like the deepest betrayal, and for that, I am truly sorry. But there is more to this story than what appears on the surface. My heart pounded as I continued reading. After telling you that I had updated my will to include you, I received an unexpected visit from Adam and Cynthia. For the first time in years, they came together without their families, specifically to discuss my estate. They expressed concerns about the rumors they had heard that I intended to leave you the house. They reminded me of family legacy and bloodlines. They spoke of their father's wishes that family property remain within the family. I felt a surge of anger as I imagined this conversation. Adam and Cynthia, who had barely visited, suddenly appearing to protect their inheritance from the woman who had devoted a decade to their mother's care. What troubled me most, Evelyn's letter continued, was not their desire for the house itself, but their suggestion that you had somehow manipulated me into changing my will. That my confused state made me vulnerable to your influence, that your care had been a calculated plan to secure my property. The accusation stung. In 10 years of daily caregiving, of middle-of-the-night emergencies, of cleaning bodily fluids, of endless doctor appointments, ulterior motives had never entered my mind. I had cared for Evelyn because she was family, because she had needed me, because it was the right thing to do. I knew these accusations were false, the letter went on, but their visit revealed something important: the true nature of my children's characters. And it presented me with a choice about how to respond. I paused my reading, taken aback by the deliberate tone of her words. This didn't sound like confusion or forgetfulness. This sounded like someone with a plan. I could have confronted them directly. I could have defended you and insisted on my right to leave my property to whomever I chose. But in my experience, direct confrontation rarely changes hearts. And so, I made a different choice, one that I hope you will understand once you have read this letter in its entirety. A chill ran through me as I began to suspect where this might be heading. With the help of my attorney, Mr. Branson, who has been the Reynolds family lawyer for 40 years and whom I trust implicitly, I created 2 documents. The first is my legal will, the one that has just been read, leaving the house and all assets to Adam and Cynthia. The second is this letter to you, along with certain other documents that Mr. Branson has been instructed to deliver to you exactly 1 month after the reading of the will. I flipped to the second page, my confusion growing. What was Evelyn playing at? Why create the appearance of leaving me nothing if she had intended otherwise? Margaret, I have watched you care for me with love and dignity for years, expecting nothing in return. You have shown me what family truly means, not through blood or legal documents, but through daily acts of compassion and presence. In contrast, I have watched my children visit out of obligation, growing increasingly focused on what they would receive after my death rather than what they could give during my life. The truth of her words brought tears to my eyes. I had never complained about Adam and Cynthia's infrequent visits, never wanted to come between Evelyn and her children. But their absence had been painful for her, especially in the early years before dementia blurred her awareness of time. And so I devised this test, not out of cruelty, but out of a desire to give my children one final opportunity to demonstrate the values that their father and I tried to instill in them. The house and assets are legally theirs, as the will states. But what they do with this inheritance will reveal whether they truly deserve it. A test? I reread the paragraph, trying to understand what Evelyn had been planning. In exactly 1 month, Mr. Branson will deliver to you a second set of documents, a legally binding trust that I established 3 years ago, containing the majority of my actual assets. While the family home and the accounts mentioned in the will are substantial, they represent less than half of my total estate. The remainder, including my late husband's life insurance policy that I never touched, the oceanfront property in Maine that has been in my family for generations, and investment accounts that have grown significantly over the years, has been placed in this trust. I gasped, nearly dropping the letter. I had known that Richard's family had been comfortable, but Evelyn had always lived modestly. The house was valuable, but not extravagant. I had never imagined there might be significantly more. The terms of the trust are specific. If, in the month following the reading of my will, Adam and Cynthia demonstrate genuine appreciation for your years of care by ensuring you are properly provided for, offering you a place to live, financial support, or other meaningful assistance, then the trust will benefit all 3 of you equally. My mind raced, trying to process the implications. Evelyn had created a scenario where her children would reveal their true characters through their actions, not knowing they were being tested. However, the letter continued, if they choose to take everything mentioned in the will while leaving you without support after your decade of service to our family, then the entire trust will pass to you alone. They will never know what they might have shared had they acted with decency and gratitude. I had to sit down, the weight of Evelyn's plan overwhelming me. This wasn't simple revenge or punishment. It was a final, desperate attempt to teach her children the values that material success had seemingly eroded. I know this places you in an uncomfortable position, Margaret, and for that I apologize. But I believe that people must face the natural consequences of their choices. My children have been blessed with successful careers, beautiful families, and every advantage. What they do when they believe no one is watching, when there is nothing more to gain, will reveal who they truly are. The last paragraph of the letter brought fresh tears. Whether you ultimately receive nothing beyond the personal mementos I've instructed Mr. Branson to ensure you keep, or whether you become the primary beneficiary of my trust, please know that my gratitude for your care cannot be measured in material terms. You gave me dignity in my decline and companionship in my loneliness. You are the daughter of my heart, if not my blood, and I trust that whatever happens next will unfold as it should. The letter was signed simply, "With love and gratitude, Evelyn." I sat motionless in Evelyn's favorite armchair, the one I had reupholstered when her arthritis made the original fabric too rough for her sensitive skin, trying to absorb the implications of her plan. In 1 month, the situation could change dramatically. But what would happen in the meantime? Adam had already mentioned selling the house. They would expect me to leave within the time frame they had generously offered. Should I tell them about the letter? About the second set of documents waiting with Mr. Branson? Or would that defeat the purpose of Evelyn's final test? The sound of a car in the driveway interrupted my thoughts. Through the front window, I watched Adam and Cynthia arrive, both looking somber but purposeful. They had mentioned coming by to begin taking inventory of their mother's possessions. The possessions I had dusted, rearranged for accessibility, and maintained for a decade while they built their lives elsewhere. I quickly folded the letter and slipped it into my pocket. As the doorbell rang, I made a decision. I would say nothing about Evelyn's plan. I would allow them the opportunity to demonstrate their true characters, just as their mother had intended. "Margaret, we brought some boxes," Cynthia said as I opened the door. "We thought we'd start sorting through Mom's jewelry and personal items. You should choose a few keepsakes too, of course." "How generous," I replied, the words feeling strange in my mouth as I thought of the letter tucked in my pocket. "We've also been talking," Adam added, setting down boxes in the entryway, "about your situation. We know this is difficult for everyone." I waited, giving them space to continue, curious what they would offer without prompting. "We think Mom would want us to give you some time to arrange your next steps," he said carefully. "The real estate agent mentioned that the market is actually better in spring, so there's no rush to list the property immediately." "That's right," Cynthia chimed in. "You could stay through the holidays at least. That would give you almost 3 months to find a new place. 3 months of housing in exchange for 10 years of around-the-clock care." I thought of Evelyn's words in the letter, about actions revealing true character when nothing more could be gained. "Thank you," I said neutrally. "That's very considerate." As they moved through the house, exclaiming over furniture pieces they remembered from childhood and debating which items each would take, I watched with new perspective. These were not evil people. They were simply people who had grown accustomed to prioritizing their own interests, who had learned to view their mother's care as someone else's responsibility while maintaining their claim to her possessions. "We should discuss financial arrangements too," Adam said as we took a break in the kitchen. "Mom's accounts will be frozen during probate, but Cynthia and I agree that we should compensate you for staying on these last few years." My ears perked up. Was this the moment where they would demonstrate the appreciation Evelyn had been hoping for? "We were thinking," Cynthia continued, "that $5,000 would be a fair amount. For your time and effort, $5,000 for 10 years of 24/7 care. Care that would have cost them hundreds of thousands in a nursing facility. Care that had kept their mother in her home, surrounded by her belongings and memories until her final day." I saw in that moment exactly what Evelyn had seen. Not malice or cruelty, but a profound disconnection from the reality of caregiving and a failure to value the sacrifices of others. "That's very thoughtful," I said, keeping my expression neutral. "I'll think about it." As they continued sorting through Evelyn's belongings, already discussing which antiques might fetch good prices at auction, I retreated to the sunroom where I had spent so many afternoons with their mother. The next month would reveal everything. Both. About Adam and Cynthia's characters, and about Evelyn's true feelings for the woman who had become her caregiver, confidant, and family. I touched the letter in my pocket, thinking of the test that had been set in motion. In trying to protect her assets for her blood relatives, had Evelyn inadvertently ensured they would lose the greater portion of their inheritance? Or would they surprise us both by showing the decency and gratitude their mother had hoped to? See? Only time would tell. And unlike the past 10 years of patient caregiving, this would be a very short wait indeed. The weeks following Evelyn's funeral unfolded in a strange, tense rhythm. Adam and Cynthia's initial flurry of activity, sorting possessions, meeting with realtors, discussing renovation possibilities to maximize the property value, gradually settled into a more sporadic presence as they returned to their regular lives, appearing on weekends to continue the process of dismantling their mother's home. I moved through the house like a ghost, watching as family heirlooms were cataloged, divided and packed away, items I had carefully maintained for years. The antique clock I had wound every Sunday, the delicate china I had hand-washed rather than risking the dishwasher, the leather-bound books I had read aloud to Evelyn when her eyesight began to fail, all categorized as assets rather than memories. "We're thinking of having an estate sale for the things neither of us wants," Cynthia informed me over coffee one Saturday morning, 3 weeks after the funeral. "Of course, you should select some keepsakes first." "Keepsakes," I repeated, the word feeling hollow as I looked around the kitchen where I had prepared thousands of meals adapted to Evelyn's changing needs. "Mom would want you to have something to remember her by," Cynthia insisted, misinterpreting my response as hesitation rather than dismay. "Maybe her gardening books. I know you two spent a lot of time with those plants." Her tone was kind but distant, as though offering souvenirs to a former employee rather than acknowledging a decade of family bonds. I thought of Evelyn's letter, safely hidden in my bedroom, and wondered what she would make of this interaction. "Actually," Adam interjected as he entered the kitchen, "I was thinking Margaret might want Mom's everyday jewelry. The valuable pieces will be split between us, obviously, but the costume stuff, the things Mom wore around the house, might be nice mementos." The costume stuff included the pearl necklace I had fastened around Evelyn's neck every Sunday for our special weekly lunches, even in the later stages of her illness when such routines helped orient her to time and place. The silver bracelet she had clutched in moments of anxiety, a gift from her late husband that brought comfort even when she could no longer articulate why. The brooch she had promised would someday be mine, pinned to her sweater on the day she told me she had updated her will. "Thank you," I said, swallowing my hurt. "That's very thoughtful." Each such interaction became another data point in Evelyn's posthumous test, a test her children didn't know they were taking, with stakes higher than they could imagine. As the days passed, a pattern emerged in their behavior. Surface level, courtesy masking a fundamental failure to recognize the depth of what had been lost. Not just their mother, but the family bonds that should have survived her passing. One particularly revealing moment came when Adam arrived unexpectedly on a Tuesday afternoon, carrying sleek brochures for several assisted living facilities. "I've been doing some research," he explained, spreading the glossy pamphlets across the kitchen table. "These places have reasonable rates for someone on a fixed income. Most are accepting new residents immediately." I glanced through the brochures. Basic. Facilities with shared rooms, located in a town 40 miles away where property values, and therefore costs, were significantly lower than the community where I had built my life. "I thought you might appreciate some guidance," he continued, seemingly oblivious to what he was actually communicating. since you'll need to find something soon. Cynthia and I were talking, and we really do need to get the house on the market before the spring rush if we want the best price. What about the 3 months you mentioned? I asked quietly. He had the grace to look somewhat embarrassed. Well, the market is moving faster than we expected. Our realtor says we should list by early February to capitalize on families wanting to be settled before the next school year. But don't worry, the places I'm showing you can often expedite applications for seniors in need. Seniors in need, I echoed, the phrase landing like a slap. At 65, I had become an elderly charity case in his eyes, rather than the woman who had cared for his mother through the final decade of her life. I know it's not ideal, Adam said, mistaking my response for disappointment rather than the quiet anger it was. But Mom's will was clear, and Cynthia and I have our own families to consider. Of course, I replied, thinking of the second document, waiting at Mr. Branson's office, the trust that might dramatically alter the landscape depending on what unfolded in the coming days. Family comes first. Adam nodded, relieved by my apparent acceptance. Exactly. And speaking of family, I've been meaning to ask. Mom had a sapphire ring, my grandmother's originally. Cynthia and I haven't been able to locate it. Do you know where it might be? Ring in question had been safely stored in Evelyn's jewelry box for years, taken out occasionally for special occasions. I had helped her put it on for Adam's daughter's high school graduation 3 years earlier, the last family event she had attended before traveling became too difficult. It should be in her jewelry box, I answered truthfully. In the small velvet pouch in the top drawer. Adam frowned. We checked there. It's not with her other jewelry. That's strange, I said. She was always careful with it. His expression shifted subtly, suspicion flickering across his features. It's quite valuable, you know, a family heirloom. The implication hung in the air between us, that perhaps I had taken it, that my decade of trustworthy care had been a long con leading to the theft of a ring, that the woman who had bathed, dressed, and comforted his mother through years of decline might also be a thief. I suggest you check with Mr. Branson, I said finally, maintaining my composure. Your mother may have made specific arrangements for certain family pieces. The conversation left a bitter taste that lingered long, after Adam departed with his brochures and his unspoken accusations. This too became part of the accumulating evidence in Evelyn's test. Not just what her children offered me, but what they assumed about me once their mother was gone. As the 1-month mark approached, Cynthia and Adam's visits became more focused on finalizing their plans for the property. They scheduled a meeting with a contractor to discuss updates that would make the house more appealing to today's buyers. They arranged for an auctioneer to evaluate the furniture and artwork. They began referring to when Margaret moves out, rather than if. Neither mentioned again the $5,000 they had initially suggested as compensation for my years of care. Perhaps they had reconsidered the amount as too generous, or perhaps it had simply slipped their minds amid the more pressing concerns of maximizing their inheritance. 3 days before the 1-month anniversary of the will reading, I received a call from Mr. Branson. Mrs. Wilson, he said, his formal tone warming slightly. I wanted to confirm our appointment for Friday afternoon. Yes, I replied, glancing around to ensure I was alone in the house. 2 o'clock at your office. That's correct. And he hesitated, lowering his voice, though there was no one to overhear him. Has there been any significant development regarding your living arrangements or financial support from the Reynolds children? No, I answered simply. They've suggested some assisted living facilities in Millbrook and given me until early February to vacate the house. There was a pause on the line. I see, he said finally. And have they offered any financial compensation for your years of service to their mother? They mentioned $5,000 shortly after the funeral, but haven't brought it up again. Another pause, longer this time. I understand. In that case, our Friday meeting will proceed as Mrs. Reynolds specified in her instructions to me. Is there anything else you need before then? No, thank you, Mr. Branson. As I hung up, I realized that Evelyn's test was nearly complete. Adam and Cynthia had made their choices based on legal entitlement rather than moral obligation, on blood relationship rather than demonstrated care. They had selected the inheritance they could see rather than considering the broader meaning of family their mother had tried to instill. That evening, as I sat in the garden Evelyn and I had tended together for so many seasons, I found myself wondering about the sapphire ring Adam had mentioned. Had it truly disappeared? Or was it, perhaps, part of the trust holdings Mr. Branson would reveal on Friday? The garden had been my refuge throughout my years caring for Evelyn, the place where I could step outside for brief moments of respite while she napped, where we had sat together on good days, watching butterflies visit the flowering plants we had selected specifically to attract them. Soon it would belong to someone else, someone who might rip out the carefully established perennials in favor of low-maintenance landscaping that would show better to prospective buyers. My reflections were interrupted by the arrival of Cynthia, unexpectedly alone and carrying a small gift bag. "Margaret," she said, looking somewhat uncomfortable as she joined me on the garden bench. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," I replied, curious about this unusual solo visit. "Is everything all right?" She nodded, fidgeting with the gift bag's handles. "Yes, fine. I wanted to speak with you privately without Adam." This was new. The siblings had presented a united front throughout the process of dismantling their mother's estate. Adams, very focused on the financial aspects of all this, she continued, choosing her words carefully. The property value, the auction estimates, maximizing the estate, which is important, of course, but I've been thinking about the human elements too. I waited, giving her space to continue. "The truth is, Margaret, I feel terrible about how all this is unfolding." She handed me the gift bag. "This isn't much, but I wanted you to have it." Inside the bag was a small jeweler's box. Opening it, I found a modest silver locket, not valuable, but immediately recognizable as one Evelyn had worn occasionally. "Mom showed it to me once," Cynthia explained. "It has a photo of you and her inside from some garden club event a few years ago. She said you were the daughter she got later in life." The unexpected gesture and words brought tears to my eyes. I opened the locket to find exactly what Cynthia had described. A tiny photograph of Evelyn and me, smiling together among blooming roses at the local garden club's annual show. "Adam thinks we should sell most of the jewelry," Cynthia continued. "But I set this aside. It seemed like it should be yours." "Thank you," I said sincerely, closing my hand around the locket. "This means a great deal to me." Cynthia looked at me directly for perhaps the first time since her mother's funeral. "I know we haven't handled this well, Margaret. The truth is, Adam and I have never really known what to do with guilt, and we carry a lot of it about Mom's final years, about not being here more often, about leaving so much to you." The candid admission surprised me. "Evelyn understood that you had your own lives," I offered. "But that's just it," Cynthia countered, her voice stronger now. "We always use that as the excuse. Our jobs, our families, the distance. But people make time for what they prioritize, don't they? And we didn't prioritize Mom. You did." The simple truth of this acknowledgement hung in the evening air between us. "I've been talking to Adam about offering you something more substantial than what we initially discussed," she continued. "To recognize everything you did. He's resistant, says the house and investments are our inheritance by law. But I'm not sure that's the point." "What do you think is the point?" I asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. Cynthia sighed, looking out at the garden we had created. "I think the point is what Mom would want us to do. Not what the will legally requires, but what would honor how she lived and what she valued." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across Evelyn's beloved garden, I wondered if perhaps her test might yield more complex results than either of us had anticipated. Friday. Arrived with a crisp clarity that seemed fitting for a day of reckoning. As I prepared for my appointment with Mr. Branson, I found myself lingering over morning routines that had become second nature during my years caring for Evelyn, checking the thermostat, adjusting the blinds to let in the perfect amount of light, even preparing 2 cups of tea before remembering there was only one to drink. The silver locket Cynthia had given me hung around my neck, a tangible reminder of the complex emotional landscape I was navigating. Her unexpected moment of reflection in the garden had introduced an element of uncertainty into what had seemed a straightforward situation. Perhaps Evelyn's test wasn't as simple as pass or fail. Perhaps there were gradations of understanding that even she hadn't anticipated. At 1:45, I pulled into the parking lot of Branson Legal Services, housed in a converted Victorian that had served as the town's law offices for 3 generations. The building emanated stability and tradition, values Evelyn had cherished throughout her life. Mr. Branson greeted me in the lobby, his formal demeanor softened by what appeared to be genuine compassion. "Mrs. Wilson, thank you for being punctual. Please, follow me to my office." As we settled in his wood-paneled sanctuary of legal documents and leather-bound books, I noticed a large envelope centered precisely on his desk blotter, Evelyn Reynolds Trust, typed across its front in official block letters. "Before we proceed," Mr. Branson began, folding his hands atop the envelope, "I want to confirm that you've received no significant financial support or accommodation from Adam or Cynthia Reynolds in the month since Mrs. Reynolds' will was read?" "That's correct," I confirmed. "They offered $5,000 immediately after the funeral but haven't mentioned it since. They've asked me to vacate the house by early February and have provided brochures for some assisted living facilities." Mr. Branson made a note in a small leather-bound notebook. "And has either of them expressed genuine appreciation for your years of service to their mother in ways that go beyond perfunctory acknowledgement?" I thought of Cynthia's visit, her gift, of the locket, her candid recognition of their failure to prioritize their mother. "Cynthia came to see me yesterday evening. She gave me a locket that had belonged to Evelyn and acknowledged that they had left too much of their mother's care to me. She mentioned wanting to offer something more substantial, but indicated that Adam was resistant." "I see." Mr. Branson made another note. "And this conversation happened yesterday? Just one day before our scheduled meeting?" "Yes." "Interesting timing," he observed, though whether he found it suspicious or promising wasn't clear from his tone. "Has Adam independently expressed similar sentiments?" "No," I replied. "His focus has remained on liquidating his mother's assets as efficiently as possible." Mr. Branson nodded, closing his notebook with a decisive snap. "Then we shall proceed as Mrs. Reynolds instructed." He opened the envelope and withdrew several documents, each with color-coded tabs and official seals. The methodical way he arranged them on his desk reminded me of Evelyn's own precise habits, her carefully organized medicine schedule, her meticulously kept garden journal, her structured daily routines that had provided stability as her cognitive abilities declined. "Mrs. Reynolds established this trust 3 years ago," Mr. Branson explained, "shortly after her diagnosis of early-stage dementia, when she still possessed full legal capacity. The trust was created with the express purpose of ensuring that her true wishes would be carried out, regardless of any pressure she might face as her condition progressed." He selected a document with a blue tab. "This trust holds assets valued at approximately $3.2 million, including the oceanfront property in Maine, various investment accounts, and several family heirlooms of significant value, including, I might note, her mother's sapphire ring." The mention of the ring Adam had questioned me about sent a small shock through me. Evelyn had secured it away from her children's immediate inheritance, perhaps anticipating their focus on material assets rather than sentimental value. As outlined in Mrs. Reynolds' letter to you, The disposition of these trust assets was contingent on her children's behavior following her death, specifically how they treated you after believing they had received their full inheritance. Mr. Branson selected another document, this one with a green tab. Mrs. Reynolds was quite specific about the conditions. She wanted to see if her children would recognize your contribution to her care out of genuine appreciation rather than obligation. Based on your testimony and my own observations over the past month, it appears they have largely failed this test. The words, though expected, still carried emotional weight. Evelyn had created circumstances that allowed her children to reveal their true characters, and those revelations had been disappointing. However, Mr. Branson continued, selecting a document with a yellow tab. Mrs. Reynolds also included provisions for partial success. Your mention of Cynthia's recent acknowledgement is relevant here. He adjusted his reading glasses, scanning. The document. The trust specifies that if either child demonstrates genuine appreciation and consideration, even if the other does not, that child may still receive a portion of the trust assets at your discretion. At my discretion, I echoed, surprised by this detail that hadn't been mentioned in Evelyn's letter. Yes, Mr. Branson confirmed. Mrs. Reynolds left the final judgment to you, with the stipulation that any genuine effort to make amends, even at the last moment, should be given fair consideration. The responsibility felt enormous. Evelyn had not only created a test for her children, but had ultimately made me the judge of their performance. The primary trust documents name you as the principal beneficiary, Mr. Branson continued, with full rights to the main property, the investment accounts, and most of the family heirlooms. You also have the authority to determine what, if anything, Adam and Cynthia might receive beyond what was specified in the will. He handed me a pen and indicated signature lines on several documents. Once you sign these, the trust assets will be transferred to your control. You'll have the legal right to the property and accounts, as well as the responsibility for any decisions regarding possible distributions to the Reynolds children. I stared at the signature lines, the magnitude of the moment overwhelming. This wasn't just about an inheritance or financial security. This was Evelyn's final statement about what constituted real family, about care and presence trumping blood, relation when blood relations failed to provide care or presence. What if I don't want to be the judge? I asked quietly. What if I don't want to decide what Adam and Cynthia deserve? Mr. Branson removed his glasses, his expression softening from professional detachment to something more human. Mrs. Reynolds anticipated you might feel this way. She included a personal note for this specific circumstance. He withdrew a small sealed envelope from the larger packet and handed it to me. Like the first letter, it bore my name in Evelyn's shaky handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper with just a few lines. Dearest Margaret, if you're reading this, you're hesitating about the responsibility I've placed on your shoulders. Remember what I told you during our garden planning each spring. We don't control which seeds will thrive. We only create the conditions for growth and then respond to what emerges. You have always been wise about nurturing potential while accepting reality. Trust that wisdom now. With endless gratitude, Evelyn. The simple message, so characteristic of Evelyn's practical approach to life's complexities, brought clarity to my swirling thoughts. She hadn't asked me to punish her children or to reward them artificially. She had asked me to respond authentically to what they had revealed about themselves through their actions. I'll sign the documents, I told Mr. Branson, reaching for the pen. As I added my signature to each indicated line, I thought about the conversations yet to come, the necessary revelations to Adam and Cynthia, their inevitable responses ranging from shock to anger to perhaps, eventually, understanding. When and how will Adam and Cynthia be informed? I asked as I signed the final document. That is also at your discretion, Mr. Branson replied. Mrs. Reynolds specified that you should control the timing and manner of disclosure. My office will prepare formal notification when you indicate we should proceed. The power Evelyn had entrusted to me felt both honoring and burdensome. She had given me not just material security, but also the authority to shape her final message to her children. "I'd like some time to consider the best approach," I said finally. Mr. Branson nodded approvingly. "A wise decision. There's no rush. Now that the legal transfers are complete, take whatever time you need." As I left his office, legal documents securely in my possession, I felt the weight of both liberation and responsibility. The home I had thought lost to me was now legally mine to keep or sell as I chose. The financial security I had never sought was now mine to manage, and the power to include or exclude Adam and Cynthia from their mother's complete legacy was now mine to exercise. The drive back to Evelyn's house, my house now, was surreal. The familiar streets and landmarks seemed unchanged, yet everything had fundamentally shifted. I was no longer a guest in someone else's home, no longer facing imminent displacement, no longer dependent on others' generosity or lack thereof. As I turned onto Maple Avenue, I noticed both Adam's and Cynthia's cars parked in the driveway. My heart raced at this unexpected development. I had imagined having days or even weeks to determine how to approach the revelations from Mr. Branson's office. Instead, it appeared, the conversation might happen much sooner than anticipated. Taking a deep breath, I parked behind their vehicles and gathered my composure before heading inside. Whatever awaited me, confrontation, negotiation, or perhaps something entirely unexpected, I would face it with the quiet dignity Evelyn had modeled throughout her life. The sound of raised voices greeted me as I opened the front door. Adam and Cynthia were in the living room, engaged in what appeared to be a heated disagreement. "Cannot believe you went behind my back," Adam was saying, his voice tight with controlled anger. "We agreed on our approach, Cynthia. We discussed this." "Our approach was wrong," Cynthia countered, standing her ground. "Dad would be ashamed of how we've handled this, and you know it." They fell silent as they realized I had entered, both turning toward me with expressions that suggested I had interrupted something significant. "Margaret," Adam acknowledged stiffly, "we didn't expect you this afternoon." "Clearly," I replied, setting down my purse on the entry table that had held Evelyn's mail and keys for decades. "Is everything all right?" Cynthia stepped forward, her expression resolute. "Actually, we were just discussing you, Margaret, about your situation and our responsibilities." "I see," I said carefully, wondering how much to reveal about my meeting with Mr. Branson. "And what conclusions have you reached?" Adam crossed his arms defensively. "Cynthia seems to have developed certain ideas overnight about changing the arrangements we've already discussed." I was explaining why that's unnecessary and inappropriate at this stage. The tension between the siblings was palpable, suggesting this wasn't their first disagreement on the matter. Whatever had transpired in Cynthia's conscience following our garden conversation appeared to have evolved into a more concrete position that her brother found threatening. "What sort of changes?" I asked, directing the question to Cynthia. She straightened her shoulders. "I believe we should offer you lifetime residency in the house, Margaret. Or at minimum, enough financial support to secure appropriate housing. Of your choice. $5,000 isn't remotely adequate compensation for what you did for Mom." Adam made a dismissive gesture. "The will is clear about Mom's intentions. If she had wanted Margaret to have the house, she would have specified that. The will reflects legal requirements, not moral ones," Cynthia argued, an echo of her garden reflection. "And I'm not convinced Mom was thinking clearly when she updated it." The irony of their argument, conducted without knowledge of the trust, that had just been transferred to my name, might have been amusing under different circumstances. They were debating my future in a house that, unbeknownst to them, now legally belonged to me. As they continued their debate, I found myself studying them with new clarity. Adam, successful and pragmatic, viewing inheritance as a straightforward matter of legal entitlement. Cynthia, coming to a belated recognition of deeper responsibilities that transcended legal documents, Both were products of the values their parents had tried to instill, yet those values had taken root differently in each of them. And now, as they argued about my fate in what they believed was still their mother's house, I held the power Evelyn had entrusted to me, the power to affirm or disrupt their understanding of family, inheritance, and consequences. The question that remained as I listened to their heated exchange was how best to honor both Evelyn's intentions and my own integrity in the complex human situation unfolding before me. "Perhaps I should have some input in this discussion," I said finally, interrupting Adam and Cynthia's heated debate. Their argument about my future, conducted as if I weren't standing right there, had gone on long enough. They turned to me with matching expressions of surprise, as though they'd momentarily forgotten I was more than just the subject of their disagreement. In that moment, I saw what Evelyn must have observed in her final years: how easily her children could lose sight of the actual humans affected by their decisions. "Of course," Cynthia recovered first, gesturing toward the armchair. That had been Evelyn's favorite seat. "We shouldn't be discussing this as if you're not here." I remained standing, drawing on a strength that had sustained me through a decade of caregiving challenges. "I've just come from a meeting with Mr. Branson," I said, watching their faces carefully. Adam's expression shifted immediately to one of alert curiosity. "Mr. Branson, what business would you have with Mom's attorney?" "It seems your mother had additional legal arrangements that weren't covered in the will reading," I explained, keeping my voice neutral despite the emotions churning beneath the surface. "What are you talking about?" Adam demanded, his tone sharpening with suspicion. "Everything was clearly outlined in the will. The house and assets go to Cynthia and me. The will only covered part of your mother's estate," I continued. "She established a separate trust 3 years ago, containing assets that weren't included in the will reading." Cynthia stepped forward, her expression a mix of confusion and dawning realization. "A trust? What kind of trust?" I took a deep breath, knowing that my next words would permanently alter our relationships. "A trust that was contingent on how you and Adam treated me after her death. A trust that held the majority of her actual assets, including the main property and most of her investments." The silence that followed was absolute. Adam's face drained of color, while Cynthia sank slowly onto the sofa, her hand covering her mouth. "This is absurd," Adam finally sputtered. "Mom would never—" "She did," I interrupted firmly. "She created a test to see if you would show genuine appreciation for the care I provided, or if you would simply take your inheritance and leave me with nothing. The documents from Mr. Branson's office sat in my purse, but I didn't need to produce them yet." The truth in my words was evident in my unwavering gaze. "A test?" Cynthia whispered, realization dawning in her eyes. "And we failed." "Not necessarily," I replied, turning toward her. "Your mother included provisions for partial success. She recognized that people can grow and change. That understanding sometimes comes late, but shouldn't be discounted when it arrives." Adam began pacing, his lawyer's mind clearly racing to understand the legal implications. "So this alleged trust, who controls it now? What exactly does it stipulate?" I met his gaze directly. "The trust has been transferred to my name. I now legally own this house, the main property, and the majority of your mother's financial assets." The statement hung in the air like a thunderclap. Adam froze mid-step, his face contorting with disbelief and anger. "That's not possible," he insisted. "Mom would never disinherit her own children in favor of—" "In favor of what, Adam?" I challenged quietly. "The person who cared for her daily for 10 years? The person who held her hand through medical procedures when her own children were too busy to visit? The person who learned to decode her needs when dementia took her ability to express them clearly?" His mouth opened and closed without producing words, the reality of his mother's choice finally penetrating his defenses. "She didn't disinherit you entirely," I continued more gently. "The will's provisions stand You and Cynthia still receive the assets specified there. But the trust, which contains significantly more, was her way of acknowledging that family is defined by actions, not just by blood. Cynthia wiped away tears that had begun streaming down her face. "When you came to the garden yesterday and gave me that locket," she began. "I didn't know about the trust then," I assured her. "I knew your mother had left me a letter mentioning additional documents with Mr. Branson, but I didn't know the details until today." She nodded, clutching the arm of the sofa as if to steady herself. "So my sudden attack of conscience was too late." "That's not necessarily true," I said. "Your mother gave me discretion over how the trust assets should be distributed. She wanted me to respond to genuine growth, even if it came at the last moment." Adam's expression hardened. "So now we're supposed to beg you for our mother's money? Prove ourselves worthy to someone who's not even blood family?" His words stung, but they also revealed exactly the attitude Evelyn had anticipated. The prioritization of legal entitlement and blood relation over demonstrated care and commitment. "No one is asking you to beg, Adam," I replied calmly. "Your mother simply wanted you to recognize that family is built through presence and care, not just genetic connection. She hoped her death might prompt that realization, but she was prepared for the possibility that it wouldn't." "This is surreal," he muttered, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I need to consult with my own attorney. This can't possibly be legal." "It's entirely legal," I assured him. "Your mother had full capacity when she established the trust, with proper legal guidance and documentation. Mr. Branson maintained meticulous records precisely because he anticipated you might challenge the arrangement." As Adam continued to process this reversal of fortune, Cynthia rose shakily from the sofa. "What happens now, Margaret?" she asked quietly. It was the question I had been asking myself since leaving Mr. Branson's office. What would justice look like in this situation? What would honor Evelyn's intentions while allowing room for genuine growth? "I haven't decided yet," I answered honestly. "Your mother trusted me to respond appropriately to whatever unfolded. I need time to consider what that means." "I should have visited more," Cynthia said, her voice breaking. "I told myself I was busy, that you had everything under control, that Mom wouldn't really notice anyway as her condition worsened. But those were excuses, and I knew it even then." Her candor was striking, the first unequivocal acknowledgement from either sibling of the choices they had made during their mother's decline. "Mom noticed," I said gently. "She understood how busy your lives were, but she also recognized the difference between unavoidable absence and chosen distance." Adam had moved to the window, staring out at the garden his mother had loved, his back rigid with what might have been anger, or perhaps the first signs of remorse. "How much?" he asked, without turning around. "How much is in this trust compared to what was in the will?" "The will covered assets of approximately $800,000, I replied. "The trust contains assets valued at approximately $3.2 million. His shoulders sagged visibly at the figure. "And you have complete control over all of it now?" "Yes." He turned finally, his expression more resigned than combative. "And what do you intend to do with it? With our family's legacy?" The question carried multiple layers, practical concerns about the disposition of valuable assets, but also deeper questions about heritage, memory, and belonging. What right did I have to control the Roosevelt family legacy? What obligation did I have to honor Evelyn's intentions while allowing for the possibility of growth in her children? "I intend to honor your mother's wishes," I said simply, "which means recognizing both her disappointment in how you prioritized your relationship with her and her enduring hope that you might eventually understand what she tried to teach you about family." Cynthia moved to stand beside her brother, a united front despite their recent disagreement. "We'd like the opportunity to make this right," she said. "Not just because of the money, though I won't pretend that's not significant, but because I think Mom was trying to teach us something important, and we've been slow to learn it. I studied their faces. Cynthia's tear-streaked but resolved. Adam's still struggling between resistance and recognition. They were not villains in this story, simply flawed humans who had made choices with consequences they hadn't anticipated. "I'm going to take some time to think," I told them. "This isn't a decision to be made hastily or emotionally. Your mother spent years creating this arrangement. I won't unravel it in an afternoon." Adam nodded stiffly. "That's reasonable. We should all take some time to process this information. In the meantime," I continued, "I think it's best if we pause the plans to sell the house or distribute its contents. Since I now legally own the property, those decisions will be mine to make." The reality of the power shift seemed to hit Adam anew with these practical implications. His jaw tightened, but he managed a clipped nod. "Of course, we'll respect your ownership rights." As they prepared to leave, clearly eager to retreat and reconsider their positions in light of these revelations, Cynthia paused at the door. "The sapphire ring Adam was looking for," she said hesitantly. "Is it part of the trust assets?" "Yes," I confirmed. "Along with several other family heirlooms your mother specifically set aside." She nodded thoughtfully. "Mom always said it should go to the first granddaughter who truly understood its value, not just its price." A small, sad smile touched her lips. I think I'm only now beginning to understand what she meant by that. After they had gone, I moved through the rooms of the house that was now legally mine, touching familiar objects that carried the weight of Evelyn's life and, by extension, my own. The grandfather clock that had marked the hours of our days together. The well-worn volumes of poetry I had read aloud when conversation became too difficult for her. The collection of photographs that traced her journey from young bride to grandmother, all the stages of a life well lived. In her final act, Evelyn had given me not just material security, but also a profound responsibility. The power to shape how her children would receive their family legacy. It wasn't a responsibility I had sought, but it was one I now needed to handle with the same care and discernment I had brought to every aspect of her well-being over our years together. As the afternoon light filtered through the curtains, Evelyn and I had selected together, illuminating dust motes that danced in golden beams. I found myself returning to the garden, the place where we had spent so many peaceful hours, where Cynthia had made her first tentative step toward acknowledgement, where I had always found clarity when decisions weighed heavily. Settling on the bench surrounded by the perennials we had planted together, I considered the seeds Evelyn had sown with her unconventional trust arrangement. Seeds of recognition, accountability, and perhaps eventually reconciliation. Like the garden we had tended together, some of those seeds might thrive, while others might fail to take root. My role now was not to force growth where there was no potential, but to create conditions where genuine understanding might flourish. The decision ahead was not a simple matter of punishment or reward, inclusion or exclusion. It was about honoring Evelyn's deepest values while recognizing the complex humanity of everyone involved, including Adam and Cynthia, whose failings were real but not immutable, and including myself, now entrusted with power I had never sought, over people I had once considered family. Tomorrow I would begin the careful work of determining what justice might look like in this tangled human situation. Today, as the garden settled into evening and the first stars appeared overhead, I simply sat with the profound knowledge that Evelyn's final gift to me had been not just material security, but also the chance to demonstrate the values of discernment, compassion, and integrity that she had recognized in me all along. In her own way, even in death, she had ensured I would never be treated as merely the caretaker again. 3 months after the revelation of Evelyn's trust changed everything, I sat at the dining room table, the same table where I had patiently fed Evelyn countless meals as her abilities declined. reviewing the final documents Mr. Branson had prepared. Outside, spring was bringing the garden back to life, crocuses and daffodils emerging from soil. Evelyn and I had amended together over the years. The past months had been a journey of reflection, difficult conversations, and carefully considered decisions. Adam and Cynthia had responded to the trust revelation in ways that both confirmed and occasionally surprised my expectations, their initial shock evolving into more complex responses that revealed deeper aspects of their characters. Adam had indeed consulted his attorney, who confirmed what Mr. Branson had told me. The trust was legally unassailable, established when Evelyn still had full capacity, with meticulous documentation and proper procedures. After exhausting his legal options, Adam had retreated into a stiff formality, our interactions limited to necessary discussions about family possessions and financial matters. Cynthia, on the other hand, had embarked on what appeared to be a genuine journey of recognition and regret. Her initial acknowledgement in the garden had deepened into more substantive reflection about the years she had abdicated responsibility for her mother's care. I told myself we were busy with our own lives, she had admitted during one of several conversations over coffee in Evelyn's, now my, kitchen. But the truth is, Mom's decline frightened me. It was easier to leave her care to you than to face what was happening to her. These conversations had informed the decisions now formalized in the documents before me, decisions that had required both compassion and clarity, both recognition of genuine growth and accountability for past choices. The doorbell interrupted my thoughts. Glancing at the clock, I realized it was time for the meeting I had arranged with Adam, Cynthia, and Mr. Branson to finalize the trust arrangements I had spent months considering. I opened the door to find them all arriving together, Mr. Branson, in his customary formal attire, Cynthia with a tentative smile, and Adam maintaining the careful neutrality that had characterized his approach since the trust revelation. "Please come in," I welcomed them, leading the way to the dining room where I had arranged chairs around the table and prepared a simple spread of coffee, tea, and Evelyn's favorite lemon cookies made from her recipe. The small touch, cookies, from Evelyn's handwritten recipe card, served on her china plate, seemed to affect both siblings. Cynthia immediately recognized them, her eyes softening at the familiar sight. Even Adam's carefully maintained facade cracked slightly as he registered the connection to childhood memories. "Thank you all for coming," I began once everyone was seated. "I've given this matter extensive thought, and I believe I've reached decisions that honor both Evelyn's intentions and what I've observed over these past months." Mr. Branson nodded approvingly, already familiar with my plans after helping prepare the necessary documentation. Cynthia leaned forward slightly, her expression a mix of hope and resignation. Adam remained carefully composed, his fingers laced tightly on the tabletop. "When your mother created this trust arrangement," I continued, "she wasn't seeking revenge or trying to punish you. She was attempting to teach something she felt you had lost sight of. That family is defined by care and presence, not just blood relation or legal documents." Cynthia nodded, while Adam's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I've tried to approach these decisions with the same intention, not to punish or reward, but to honor the values Evelyn lived by and hoped to see continued." I turned to Mr. Branson, who opened his briefcase and distributed folders containing identical documents to each of us. "These documents outline the final disposition of the trust assets," I explained. "I've decided on an approach that acknowledges everyone's position while creating opportunities for continued growth and connection." Taking a deep breath, I outlined the decisions that had required so much careful consideration. First, this house will remain my primary residence, but I'm establishing it as a life estate, meaning that upon my death, it will pass to both of you equally. This honors both my decade of care and maintenance and the property's significance in your family history. Adam's eyebrows rose slightly, the first indication that my decisions might not align with his expectations. Second, The main oceanfront property will be placed in a family trust that includes all three of us as beneficiaries. It cannot be sold without unanimous consent, and each of us will have equal access for personal use. My hope is that this arrangement will preserve an important family legacy while encouraging us to find ways to share it respectfully. That's more than fair, Cynthia commented, genuine surprise in her voice. Third, I continued, the financial assets will be divided as follows: 40% to me, 30% to each of you. This distribution acknowledges both your mother's wish to ensure my security and her desire to include you in her legacy if you demonstrated understanding of her values. Adam's carefully neutral expression finally shifted. You're giving us 60%? He asked, unable to mask his surprise. I'm acknowledging that wealth accumulation was never my priority, I corrected gently. What I provided for your mother was care, not financial management. The assets she accumulated throughout her life stemmed from her marriage to your father and their joint efforts. While I believe she intended me to have security, I don't believe she wanted to entirely disconnect. These resources from the family that helped build them, Mr. Branson cleared his throat. I should note that even with this distribution, Mrs. Wilson's portion represents significant financial security. The total trust assets have actually appreciated to nearly $3.5 million since Mrs. Reynolds established. There are conditions, I added, turning back to Adam and Cynthia. 10% of each of your shares will be placed in a charitable foundation established in Evelyn's name, focused on supporting in-home care for elderly individuals with dementia. You'll both serve on the board of this foundation alongside me, attending quarterly meetings and participating in its direction. This stipulation, the one I had been most uncertain about, was met with different reactions. Cynthia nodded immediately, while Adam's expression suggested he was calculating the financial impact against the time commitment. Additionally, I continued, specific family heirlooms will be distributed according to this detailed inventory. I indicated a section in the documents where I had carefully listed every item of sentimental or monetary value, with clear designations of who would receive each. You're giving me grandmother's sapphire ring? Cynthia asked, her finger pausing. On that line item. Yes, I confirmed. Your mother once told me it should go to the woman in the family who understood its true value. I believe you're growing into that understanding. Tears welled in her eyes as she continued reading the inventory. And Adam gets Dad's watch collection and the first edition books. Items I know hold particular meaning for him, I explained, glancing at Adam, who was studying the list with careful attention. As they reviewed the documents, I explained my final decision, perhaps the most important one. The legal arrangements are important, but they're not the entire purpose of today's meeting. Your mother's greater concern was what you would learn from this experience. The trust was her attempt to teach through consequences rather than through lectures that had gone unheeded. Both siblings looked up from their documents, their attention fully engaged. I've had 3 months to observe your responses to the trust revelation. Cynthia, you've demonstrated what appears to be genuine reflection and growth. You've acknowledged your absence during your mother's decline and shown interest in understanding the daily realities of her care. Adam, you've been more reserved, focused primarily on legal and financial aspects rather than emotional reconciliation. Adam shifted uncomfortably but didn't dispute my assessment. However, I continued, I don't believe your mother would want permanent estrangement. The distribution I've outlined creates ongoing connection points, the house eventually passing to you both, the main property requiring cooperation, the foundation demanding collaboration. These aren't punishments but opportunities to continue the growth your mother hoped to see. Mr. Branson nodded approvingly. Mrs. Reynolds would have appreciated this thoughtful approach. The legal documents create structure, but the real work will happen in how you all choose to relate to each other moving forward. After reviewing the details and signing the necessary papers, Mr. Branson excused himself, leaving me alone with Adam and Cynthia. the first time we had been together without lawyers or documents between us since the trust revelation. The silence that followed wasn't entirely comfortable, but it held possibility rather than hostility. "You could have taken everything," Adam finally said, his tone suggesting he was still processing this reality. "Legally, you had that right." "I could have," I acknowledged. "But that wouldn't have honored what your mother truly wanted. She didn't use the trust to disinherit you completely, even when she suspected you might fail her test. She left room for redemption and growth. I don't think I realized until recently how much Mom sacrificed for us," Cynthia said quietly. "Not just in her final years, but throughout our lives. She was always the one maintaining family connections, remembering birthdays, creating traditions. When that energy turned toward needing care instead of giving it, we both stepped back." Adam's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. "I told myself I was too busy, that you had it handled," he said, addressing me directly for perhaps the first time since the trust revelation. But Cynthia's right. When Mom needed us to show up the way she always had for us, we failed. The simple acknowledgement, not offered to secure financial advantage but expressed after the agreements were already signed, felt like the first genuine step toward the understanding Evelyn had hoped to foster. "Your mother was a remarkable woman," I said, feeling the familiar ache of loss that still surfaced regularly. "She understood human nature, both its weaknesses and its capacity for growth. This entire arrangement wasn't about the money or property. Ultimately, it was about recognizing what truly constitutes family." As we continued talking, moving gradually from legal arrangements to more personal reflections, I felt Evelyn's presence in the room. Not in some supernatural sense, but in the values and wisdom that had shaped my approach to this complex situation. Later, that evening, after Adam and Cynthia had gone, I sat in the garden as twilight settled over the emerging spring blooms. The decisions had been made, the documents signed, the legal matters resolved. What remained was the more subtle work of relationship, of finding a way forward that honored both past hurts and future possibilities. I touched the silver locket Cynthia had given me, which still held the small photograph of Evelyn and me among the roses. Whatever happened next with her children, whether genuine reconciliation blossomed or merely respectful coexistence, I knew that Evelyn's final lesson had been delivered. Family is not defined by legal documents or blood relations alone. It is built through presence, sacrifice, and care. It manifests in showing up when showing up is difficult, in prioritizing relationship over convenience, in recognizing the value of care given over benefits received. My grandmother's wisdom echoed. In my mind, a person's true character isn't revealed when things are easy, but when difficult choices must be made. Evelyn had created circumstances that revealed not just her children's characters, but also, ultimately, her own wisdom and foresight, and perhaps mine as well. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared overhead, I felt a sense of completion. Not because every wound had healed or every relationship had been perfectly restored, but because justice and mercy had found balance in decisions that created room for continued growth while acknowledging painful truths. Evelyn's letter had initially seemed like her final communication, her last attempt to ensure I would not be cast aside after years of devoted care. But the true letter had been written not in ink, but in the values she embodied throughout her life, and in the trust she placed in me to carry those values forward even in difficult circumstances. That was the real legacy, not the house or the investments or the property in Maine, but the demonstration that family transcends legal definitions, that care creates bonds as meaningful as blood, that choices reveal character in ways that words never can, and that sometimes the most powerful response to being undervalued is not righteous anger, but thoughtful discernment that creates space for everyone to grow into their better selves. The hidden letter that my mother-in-law secretly left me had indeed revealed a truth so shocking that it changed everything. Not just for her children who had taken her estate, but for me as well. It had transformed me from someone whose decade of care could be dismissed with brochures for assisted living into someone whose judgment and values would shape a family's legacy for generations to come. That transformation, from caregiver to legacy bearer, was perhaps Evelyn's greatest gift of all. 2 years had passed since Evelyn's final lesson had transformed all our lives. At 67, I found myself hosting the second annual family gathering at the main oceanfront property, a tradition I had established after the trust settlement was finalized. The sprawling cedar-shingled house overlooking the Atlantic had become neutral territory where Evelyn's reconfigured family could continue the delicate work of building new relationships based on recognition rather than obligation. The sea breeze carried the scent of pine and salt as I arranged wildflowers on the deck table, preparing for an afternoon that would have been unimaginable during those tense days following the trust revelation. "Need any help with that?" Cynthia asked, stepping onto the deck with a pitcher of lemonade made from Evelyn's recipe. The past 2 years had softened the formality between us, allowing a cautious friendship to develop, not the instant closeness of true family, but something more genuine than our previous caretaker-visitor dynamic. "I think we're nearly ready," I replied, adjusting the final bloom in the arrangement. "Is Adam back from town yet?" "Just pulled in," she confirmed. "He's bringing the lobster rolls from that place Mom always loved." The casual mention of Evelyn's preferences, now acknowledged and honored rather than forgotten, marked one of many small but significant shifts in how her children approached her memory. The woman who had once been relegated to occasional obligatory visits had become a presence they actively worked to remember and understand. Adam appeared, carrying paper bags from the local seafood shack Evelyn had insisted on visiting during every main vacation throughout her children's youth. His relationship with me remained more reserved than Cynthia's, but the open hostility following the trust revelation had gradually transformed into a guarded respect. "Got extra tartar sauce," he announced, setting down the bags. "Mom always said they never gave enough." These small acknowledgments of Evelyn's preferences and habits had become more frequent from both siblings. Not performance for my benefit, I believed, but genuine efforts to maintain connection with their mother's memory. As we settled around the table overlooking the ocean where gulls wheeled against the blue summer sky, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this unlikely gathering. From the devastation of being excluded from Evelyn's will, to the shock of the trust revelation, to the careful rebuilding of relationships based on clearer understanding, each stage had shaped not just our external circumstances, but our internal landscapes as well. "I had a call from the foundation director yesterday," Adam mentioned as we began our meal. "The respite care program is ready to launch in 3 counties now. They're calling it the Evelyn Reynolds Caregiver Support Initiative. The foundation, established in Evelyn's name with portions of the trust assets, had become an unexpected point of connection among the 3 of us. Quarterly board meetings had evolved from stilted formalities to engaged discussions about how best to support families navigating the challenges we had experienced from different perspectives." "That's wonderful news," I said sincerely. "Evelyn would be particularly pleased about the overnight respite services. She always worried about caregiver burnout." "Something we didn't appreciate enough at the time," Cynthia acknowledged, the simple admission coming more easily now than it once had. "I was reviewing the program materials, and it made me realize how many nights you must have been up with her, Margaret." "Too many to count," I admitted. Though that's true for most long-term caregivers. The difference being that most aren't caring for someone else's mother while that person's children are absent, Adam added, surprising me with his directness. 2 years ago, such a statement would have been unthinkable from him. The foundation work had affected him more deeply than either Cynthia or I had anticipated. Initial reluctant participation had evolved into genuine engagement as he applied his legal and financial expertise to creating sustainable support systems for families navigating elder care challenges. "The past can't be changed," I offered, the perspective of time having softened some of the sharper edges of memory. "What matters is that these services will help other families navigate these situations more successfully." After lunch, we walked along the rocky shoreline, a tradition Evelyn had maintained with her children throughout their youth, and one we had reinstated as part of our new family rhythm. The afternoon sun warmed the weathered rocks as waves crashed against the shore, creating the soundtrack that had accompanied generations of Reynolds family summers. "I found some of Mom's old journals in the attic storage last month," Cynthia said as we paused to watch a sailboat tacking against the wind. "Reading them has been illuminating." "In what way?" I asked, curious about this window into Evelyn's inner thoughts. "She wrote about her fears of becoming dependent as she aged," Cynthia explained. "Long before her diagnosis, she worried about becoming a burden to her children. There are entries from when Adam and I were still in college where she was already thinking about how to maintain her dignity if her health failed." The revelation of Evelyn's early concerns created a poignant connection to the woman I had cared for, the proud, practical person who had faced her decline with as much grace as circumstances allowed. "She also wrote about you, Margaret," Cynthia continued. "After you and Dad married, she described you as refreshingly straightforward and someone who sees people as they are, not as social obligations." The characterization brought a smile to my face, so perfectly capturing Evelyn's direct assessment style. "The most revealing entries are from after Dad died," Cynthia added, her voice softening. "She wrote about feeling caught between not wanting to impose on her children and fearing that professional care would be impersonal. She worried about losing herself before she lost her life." Adam, who had been walking slightly ahead, turned back toward us. "Did she write about the trust? About her plans?" Cynthia shook her head. "Not specifically, but there are entries that hint at her thinking. Notes about wanting to ensure that care would be recognized as valuable work, not just expected female obligation. Comments about wanting her legacy to reflect her values, not just distribute her possessions." The journals offered confirmation that Evelyn's trust arrangement hadn't been merely a reaction to her children's absence, but part of a longer, more thoughtful consideration of care, family, and legacy. As we continued our walk, a comfortable silence fell between us. Not the tense quiet of unspoken resentments, but the natural pause of shared reflection. The ocean continued its timeless rhythm against the shore, indifferent to the human dramas that unfolded against its backdrop. Back at the house, as evening approached, I excused myself to my room briefly, returning with a small wooden box inlaid with mother of pearl, one of Evelyn's treasured possessions that I had included in my personal selections from her belongings. "I've been waiting for the right moment to share this," I explained as I rejoined Adam and Cynthia on the deck, where the setting sun cast long golden light across the weathered boards. "I think today feels appropriate." Opening the box, I removed an envelope I had discovered 6 months earlier while organizing some of Evelyn's personal papers, an envelope marked simply, "For Margaret, Adam, and Cynthia. To be opened when understanding has grown." "What is it?" Adam asked, setting down, his drink with undisguised curiosity. "A letter from your mother," I explained. "One I didn't know existed until recently. Given how much has changed since her trust revelation, I think now might be the time she would have wanted us to read it." Cynthia moved closer, her expression a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. "You haven't read it yet?" "No," I confirmed. The envelope indicates it's for all 3 of us together. With careful fingers, I opened the envelope and unfolded the pages within. Evelyn's distinctive handwriting immediately recognizable despite the progressive tremor that had marked her final years. "My dears," I began reading aloud, "if you are reading this letter together, "Then something I deeply hoped for has come to pass. You have found a way to move beyond the immediate reactions to my unconventional estate arrangements and toward some measure of mutual understanding." The precise anticipation of our current circumstances sent a collective shiver through us, Evelyn's foresight reaching across time to address exactly the moment we now shared. "Margaret, my trusted friend and caregiver, I can imagine your initial discomfort with the position in which I placed you. Enforcing consequences was never your nature. You've always preferred to see the best in people, even when they've given you little reason to do so. I apologize for the burden of judgment I placed on your shoulders, but I entrusted this task to you precisely because I knew you would approach it with both clarity and compassion." The words brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Evelyn's understanding of my discomfort with the power she had given me offering posthumous validation of the careful path I had tried to navigate. "Adam and Cynthia, my beloved but often distant children, if you are hearing these words in Margaret's company, you have demonstrated the capacity for growth I always believed you possessed, even in my moments of greatest disappointment. Remember that my arrangements were never about punishment, but about teaching what matters most before it is too late to learn." Adam shifted in his chair, his expression difficult to read in the fading light, while Cynthia wiped away tears that had begun to fall freely. "The three of you represent different aspects of what family truly means: blood relation, legal connection, and demonstrated care. In my final years, I came to understand that it is the third element that matters most, though all three together create the strongest bonds." I paused, the wisdom of Evelyn's words resonating with what we had all, in our different ways, come to recognize over the past 2 years. Whatever arrangements you have reached regarding the material assets I left behind, know that my greatest hope was not for perfect distribution of property, but for recognition of deeper values. If you have found your way to reading this letter together, then that hope has at least partially been realized. The letter continued with personal messages for each of us, acknowledging Adam's professional strengths while encouraging him to apply them to more meaningful pursuits than mere accumulation, recognizing Cynthia's emotional intelligence while challenging her to match it with committed action, thanking me for years of care while reminding me that I deserved recognition and security in my own right. "My final wish," I read as the letter drew to a close, "is that the lessons learned through this difficult process might extend beyond my own family. The challenges we faced, caregiving across family structures, balancing professional demands with personal obligations, recognizing the value of unpaid but essential labor, are not unique to us. They reflect broader societal questions about how we care for one another, especially across generations." As the sun disappeared below the horizon, painting the sky in deepening shades of pink and purple, I read Evelyn's final words: "Whatever differences remain between you, whatever hurts, have not fully healed, remember that understanding rarely comes without difficulty. The family you build moving forward, whether bound by blood, law, or chosen care, will be stronger for having faced these challenges honestly. With enduring love and hope for what you might become together, Evelyn." I folded the letter carefully, as silence settled over the deck, broken only by the rhythmic sound of waves against the shore below. The three of us sat without speaking, absorbing Evelyn's final communication. Not just her words, but the remarkable foresight that had allowed her to address us in this moment of tentative reconciliation she had somehow anticipated. "She knew," Adam finally said, his voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. "She knew exactly how it would all unfold." "Not exactly," I countered gently. "She created circumstances that would reveal character and encourage growth, but she couldn't know precisely how each of us would respond. She gave us the opportunity to fail or succeed based on our own choices," Cynthia added. "Just as she did throughout our lives, really." As darkness settled completely over the ocean, stars emerging in the clear summer sky, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment, From the shock of exclusion from Evelyn's will, to the revelation of her trust to this tentative new family configuration based on clearer understanding of what we owed one another. The hidden letter that my mother-in-law had secretly left me 2 years earlier had indeed revealed a truth so shocking that it changed everything. But this second letter, meant for all three of us together, revealed something equally important: her enduring hope that understanding might grow from even the most painful circumstances. 2 years ago, I could never have imagined sitting peacefully with Adam and Cynthia, sharing memories of Evelyn without the sharp edge of recent betrayal coloring every interaction. I couldn't have envisioned the foundation work that had given purpose to our reluctant collaboration, or the gradual shifts in perspective that had allowed new relationships to form from the ashes of old assumptions. As we eventually made our way back inside the house Evelyn had loved, the house that now belonged to all three of us through the carefully structured trust, I felt her presence not as a ghost, but as a continuing influence. The lessons she had tried to teach in life, and had reinforced through her unconventional estate arrangements, continued to unfold in our ongoing efforts to build something meaningful from what had once been broken. Family, in the end, was not defined by legal documents or blood relations alone, but by the daily choices to show up, to care, to recognize value beyond material inheritance. It was built through presence, sacrifice, and the willingness to grow beyond comfortable assumptions about obligation and entitlement. The caregiver who had once been deemed worthy of only brochures for assisted living facilities and a token financial acknowledgement had become an equal participant in shaping a family legacy that would extend far beyond material assets. And the children who had once prioritized their own convenience over their mother's needs had begun the humbling work of recognizing what their absence had cost, not just their mother, but ultimately themselves. None of us was the same person we had been 2 years earlier, when Evelyn's hidden letter had upended our understanding of inheritance and family. The transformations hadn't been easy or complete, and the relationships remained works in progress, rather than fairy tale reconciliations. But as we gathered in the living room of the main house where generations of Evelyn's family had spent summers, the foundation of something authentic had begun to take root. Something based not on obligation or advantage, but on genuine recognition and respect. And that, I believed, was exactly what Evelyn had hoped her final lesson might eventually achieve. 5. Years had passed since that pivotal summer evening in Maine when we had read Evelyn's second letter together. At 70, I found myself sitting in the garden of what was now unquestionably my home, surrounded by the perennials Evelyn and I had planted together that continued to thrive under my care. The morning light filtered through the maple trees, creating dappled patterns on the weathered wooden bench where I often came to reflect. Today was a special day, the official opening of the Evelyn Reynolds Care Center, the culmination of 5 years of foundation work that had expanded far beyond our initial modest programs. What had begun as quarterly board meetings and small-scale respite care services had evolved into a comprehensive support system for caregivers and elderly individuals throughout the state. As I sipped my morning tea, I reflected on how much had changed since those painful days following Evelyn's death, when I had felt discarded after a decade of devotion. The journey from betrayal to reconciliation to creation of something entirely new had shaped not just my relationships with Adam and Cynthia, but my understanding of my own purpose in these later years of life. The sound of car doors closing in. The driveway signaled the arrival of Evelyn's children, no longer adversaries in a battle over inheritance, but partners in preserving and extending their mother's most meaningful legacy. "Good morning, Margaret," Cynthia called as she rounded the corner of the house, elegant in the navy suit she would wear for the center's opening ceremony. At 63, she had recently taken early retirement from her corporate position to become the foundation's first full-time executive director, channeling her organizational skills into work that honored her mother's values rather than just building shareholder value. "Perfect day for the opening," I observed, rising to greet her with the easy familiarity that had developed between us over the years. Your mother would have appreciated the symbolism of planting new roots in spring. She always did love her. Gardening metaphors, Cynthia agreed with a warm smile. Our shared understanding of Evelyn's quirks forming one of many bridges between us. Adam appeared a moment later, having evolved from the hostile presence of those early post-trust days into someone capable of genuine collegiality, if not the easy warmth his sister had developed. At 65, he had maintained his legal practice but shifted its focus significantly, now specializing in elder law and estate planning, with particular emphasis on protecting caregivers' interests. The mayor confirmed she'll be there for the ribbon cutting, he reported, his organizational efficiency one constant in a landscape of change, and the local paper is sending a photographer. The center's opening was a milestone not just for our foundation, but for the community that would benefit from its services. A place where families navigating elder care challenges could find resources, support, and practical assistance. The building itself incorporated design elements from both Evelyn's home and the main property, creating physical connections to the woman whose values had inspired its creation. I was looking at Mom's journals again last night, Cynthia mentioned as we gathered our things to leave. The early ones from when she was our age. It's strange to read her thoughts about aging and care from when it was still theoretical for her. What struck you this time? I asked, curious about these continuing discoveries of Evelyn's inner thoughts. How clearly she saw the imbalances in how society values different kinds of work, Cynthia replied. There's an entry from 40 years ago, where she questions why her friend's husband received so much recognition for financial success, while her friend's work raising children and caring for aging parents was treated as expected and unremarkable. She was ahead of her time in many ways, I observed, thinking of how Evelyn's trust arrangement had forced recognition of care work's value in the most personal and consequential manner possible. Or perhaps society has been behind the times for too long, Adam commented with unexpected insight. The issues Mom wrote about decades ago are the same ones we're still addressing through the foundation. His observation highlighted one of the most significant developments of these 5 years. The shift from viewing Evelyn's trust arrangement as merely a personal family matter to recognizing it as a response to broader societal patterns that devalued certain kinds of essential work, particularly when performed by women. As we drove to the care center for the opening ceremony, I found myself reflecting on the lasting wisdom Evelyn had imparted through her unconventional approach to inheritance. Beyond ensuring my financial security or teaching her children accountability, she had ultimately created circumstances that revealed deeper truths about value, recognition, and what constitutes meaningful legacy. The Evelyn Reynolds Care Center stood on land purchased with trust funds, its modern yet welcoming design reflecting months of careful planning. Unlike institutional facilities with their clinical atmospheres, the center had been created to feel like an extension of home, comfortable gathering spaces, a therapeutic garden, private consultation rooms, and state-of-the-art technology for health monitoring and communication. As we arrived, I was struck by the number of people already gathered. Families who had participated in our pilot programs, healthcare professionals who had partnered with the foundation, community leaders who had supported our zoning requests, and the staff who would bring the center's services to life. Quite a turnout, Adam observed, surveying the crowd with undisguised satisfaction. His initial reluctant participation in the foundation had evolved into genuine pride as he witnessed its tangible impact. The opening ceremony began with the expected formalities, speeches from local officials, acknowledgement of key donors, explanation of the center's services. When it came time for the family to speak, Cynthia stepped forward first, her corporate polish now directed toward something far more meaningful than quarterly earnings reports. My mother, Evelyn Reynolds, never sought recognition for herself, she began. She valued action over accolades, substance over appearance. When she became ill in her final years, She experienced firsthand how our systems often fail both those who need care and those who provide it. The crowd listened attentively as Cynthia continued, outlining the center's mission to address these gaps through practical support services, respite care, training programs, and advocacy efforts. But perhaps the most important thing my mother taught us, she concluded, was that recognition often comes too late unless we deliberately create systems that value care as it's being provided, not just after it's lost. Adam followed with remarks focused on the center's legal advocacy services, programs designed to help families navigate the complex intersections of healthcare, finance, and legal rights that often became battlegrounds during healthcare crises. My legal career taught me how thoroughly our systems are designed to protect financial assets, he acknowledged with a candor that would have been unimaginable 5 years earlier. What my mother taught me was how poorly those same systems protect the human assets of care, dignity, and relationship. When it came my turn to speak, I found myself looking out at the gathered community with a sense of completion that transcended the day's ceremonial milestone. From the retired teacher who had become an unexpected caregiver to the woman now helping shape how care would be valued in her community, the journey had come full circle in ways I could never have anticipated. Evelyn Reynolds was my mother-in-law. I began simply. When I married her son Richard, I gained not just a husband, but a friend whose practical wisdom and clear-eyed assessment of human nature would ultimately shape the rest of my life in unexpected ways. The story I shared wasn't the full account of betrayal, hidden trusts, and painful reckonings. Instead, I focused on the essence of what Evelyn had ultimately taught all of us. That family is defined by actions, not titles. That care creates bonds as meaningful as blood. That how we treat those who can no longer care for themselves reveals truths about our character that no professional accomplishment can disguise. This center exists because Evelyn believed that care matters, I concluded. Not just the professional care that can be purchased, but the daily acts of presence, attention, and dignity that define our humanity. Whatever services are provided, within these walls, that fundamental belief will remain at the heart of everything we do. As the ribbon was cut and the center officially opened, I found myself standing between Adam and Cynthia, the three unlikely partners Evelyn's unconventional approach had ultimately forged into something resembling family, if not in the traditional sense, then in the deeper meaning of shared purpose and mutual respect. She would have hated all this attention, Adam observed with an unexpected smile as photographers captured the moment for local media. But she would have loved what this place. Will do, Cynthia added. Both things can be true, I agreed, the simple observation reflecting the complex understanding we had all gained of the woman whose values had ultimately brought us together. Later that evening, after the celebrations had concluded and the center had begun its actual work of supporting families, I returned to my garden. Evelyn's garden originally, now truly mine after years of tending it through all seasons. The bench where we had spent so many hours in conversation during her healthier days remained my favorite place for reflection. As twilight settled over the carefully tended beds, I thought about the long, strange journey from that devastating moment in Mr. Branson's office when I learned I had been excluded from Evelyn's will to this day of creation and community celebration. The hidden letter that had revealed Evelyn's trust and her final test for her children had initially seemed like an ending, the conclusion of 10 years of caregiving and the beginning of an uncertain future. Instead, it had been merely the opening chapter in a story of transformation that had affected not just me, but an entire network of relationships, and ultimately, a community. My grandmother's wisdom about character being revealed through difficult choices had proven prophetic beyond anything she could have imagined. Evelyn's test had indeed revealed truths about Adam and Cynthia's initial priorities, but it had also created space for growth that might never have occurred without that painful catalyst. More surprisingly, it had revealed aspects of my own character I hadn't fully recognized, not just my capacity for caregiving, which I had already demonstrated through a decade with Evelyn, but my ability to navigate power once it was unexpectedly placed in my hands. The caregiver had become the decision-maker, the woman who had been nearly discarded becoming the one who determined how justice and mercy might find balance. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared overhead, I felt a sense of deep contentment that transcended the day's ceremonial milestone. The material security Evelyn's trust had provided was significant, but the true gift had been the opportunity to participate in creating meaning from what might otherwise have remained merely a painful family fracture. The care center, with its programs and services, would touch countless lives in ways that extended far beyond our immediate family circle. The Foundation's advocacy work was already influencing policy discussions about caregiver support and elder rights. The relationships that had been rebuilt, imperfectly but genuinely, demonstrated possibilities for reconciliation that transcended simple narratives of victims and villains. These tangible outcomes mattered deeply, yet underlying them was a more personal transformation that had unfolded within each of us. Adam's evolution from rigid defender of legal entitlement to advocate for caregivers' rights. Cynthia's journey from sporadic visitor to dedicated Foundation leader. My own growth from unappreciated caregiver to confident steward of a meaningful legacy. As I prepared to return inside, I touched the silver locket that still held the photograph of Evelyn and me in this very garden years earlier. The simple piece of jewelry that had once represented Cynthia's first tentative acknowledgement of my place in their mother's life now served as a tangible connection to the woman whose unconventional wisdom had ultimately transformed us all. Though, hidden letter that my mother-in-law secretly left me had indeed revealed a truth so shocking that it changed everything. Not just by redistributing material assets, but by creating circumstances where deeper values could be recognized, where genuine growth could occur, where new definitions of family and legacy could emerge from the ashes of old expectations. In her final act, Evelyn had taught us all that true inheritance isn't measured in property or possessions, but in the values we choose to carry forward, the care we provide when nothing can be gained, the wisdom we demonstrate when faced with the choice between righteous anger and transformative possibility.